The recruitment center on Colony Nexus 7 was packed with young hopefuls, all dreaming of joining the Terran Defense Fleet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as hundreds of teenagers stood in long lines, waiting for their chance to prove themselves worthy of serving humanity among the stars. Kira Vance stood near the back of the line, her worn boots scuffed and her clothes simple compared to the fancy uniforms some wealthy candidates wore. She was 17 years old. With short dark hair she had cut herself, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her hands were calloused from years of working in the mining tunnels beneath the colony's surface, and her body was lean and strong from hauling ore carts since she was 12. The boy in front of her turned around and looked her up and down with obvious disgust. His name tag said Cadet Applicant Marcus Holt, and his expensive clothes marked him as the son of some corporate executive. "You lost, sweetheart?" Marcus asked with a smirk. "The kitchen staff applications are in the other building." Kira said nothing. She had learned long ago that words wasted on fools were words she would never get back. "Seriously, though," Marcus continued, encouraged by the laughter of his friends nearby. "What makes you think they want girls in the combat program? This isn't some equality parade. This is war. The Kraloks aren't going to care about your feelings when they're ripping through human colonies." "Leave her alone, Marcus," said a voice from further up in the line. A tall young man with kind eyes stepped out of his spot. His name tag read, Cadet Applicant James Chen. "Mind your business, Chen," Marcus snapped. "I'm just being realistic. Everyone knows women don't belong in combat roles. It's basic biology. They're weaker, slower, more emotional. Send them to the front lines and they'll just get real soldiers killed." Kira finally spoke, her voice calm and flat. "I've worked the deep mines since I was 12. I've survived 3 tunnel collapses, 2 equipment failures, and a methane explosion that killed 23 men. I've never missed a shift, never complained, never asked for special treatment. What have you survived, besides your daddy's disappointment?" Marcus's face turned red with anger. He stepped toward Kira, but before he could do anything, a booming voice cut through the noise of the recruitment center. "Applicant Holt, is there a problem here?" A massive man in a fleet uniform approached. His chest was covered with medals, and his face bore scars that spoke of decades of combat. This was Sergeant Major Drake Williams, one of the most decorated soldiers in Terran history. "No, Sergeant Major," Marcus said quickly, snapping to attention. "Just having a conversation." Sergeant Major Williams looked at Kira, then back at Marcus. "Return to your spot in line, Applicant Holt. And if I hear you harassing fellow applicants again, you'll be taking the shuttle back to whatever cushy corporate station you crawled out of. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." Williams walked away, and the line began moving again. But Kira could still feel the stares, still hear the whispers. "Girl, miner's daughter, doesn't belong, waste of space." She ignored them all and kept her eyes forward. The physical examination came first. Applicants were measured, weighed, tested for reflexes, endurance, and strength. When Kira stepped up to the strength testing machine, the technician raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're in the right place, miss?" "This is for combat applicants." "I know where I am," Kira replied. She placed her hands on the grip sensors and pulled. The machine whirred and beeped as it measured her output. The technician's eyebrows rose higher and higher as the numbers climbed. That's in the top 15%. He said, looking at her with new respect. "For all applicants, male and female combined." "Mining work," Kira said simply. "Builds strength." The psychological evaluation came next. Applicants were placed in simulation chambers and subjected to increasingly stressful scenarios. Some broke down crying. Others panicked and failed to complete basic tasks. A few tried to attack the holographic enemies with their bare hands and had to be sedated. When it was Kira's turn, she found herself in a simulated colony under attack. Kraloks warriors, the insectoid aliens who had been humanity's greatest enemy for 50 years, swarmed through the streets. Simulated civilians screamed for help. Buildings burned. The sky was dark with smoke. The test administrators watched on their monitors as Kira moved through the chaos with eerie calm. She rescued simulated civilians, found cover positions, improvised weapons from debris, and even managed to take down 2 simulated Kraloks warriors using nothing but a piece of broken pipe and the element of surprise. When the simulation ended, the administrators looked at each other in amazement. How did she stay so calm? one asked. Her file says she survived a methane explosion in the mines when she was 14, another replied. 23 people died around her, including her father. She had to lead 8 survivors through collapsed tunnels for 3 days before rescue came. She's been through hell before, the first administrator said softly. The simulation probably felt like a vacation. The academic testing was the one area where Kira struggled. Growing up in the mining colonies, she had received only basic education. She could read and write and do basic math, but the advanced physics and tactical theory questions left her guessing. When the results came in, Kira's scores were a study in contrasts. Top marks in physical fitness, psychological resilience, and practical problem solving. But her academic scores were barely passing. The review board met to discuss her application. Most of them wanted to reject her. She doesn't have the educational foundation, said Admiral Chen, who ran the recruitment program. Combat officers need to understand complex tactical situations. They need to be able to calculate weapons trajectories, understand alien biology, analyze strategic data. This girl can barely do algebra. With respect, Admiral, said Sergeant Major Williams, who had been invited to offer his opinion. Some of the best soldiers I ever served with couldn't spell their own names. Education can be taught. You can't teach someone to stay calm when the world is burning around them. You can't teach them to keep fighting when everyone else has given up. This girl has something you can't learn from books. She's also female, another board member pointed out. The combat program has never had a female graduate. The physical standards, the culture, the nature of the work, it's not designed for women. Maybe that's a flaw in the design, Williams said quietly. In the end, they compromised. Kira was admitted to the program on probationary status. She would have to maintain passing grades while also meeting all physical requirements. If she fell behind in either area, she would be removed. When Kira received her acceptance letter, she didn't celebrate. She simply nodded, packed her single bag of belongings, and boarded the shuttle to the Fleet Academy on Terra Station Prime. The academy was like nothing Kira had ever seen. Terra Station Prime was the largest structure humanity had ever built. A spinning cylinder in orbit around Earth that housed over 2 million people. The academy took up an entire section of the station, with gleaming halls, advanced training facilities, and quarters that seemed luxurious compared to the cramped mining tunnels Kira had grown up in. Her first day was a disaster. When she arrived at her assigned barracks, she found 30 other recruits already there. 29 of them were male. The 30th was a young woman named Sarah Park, who looked just as uncomfortable as Kira felt. Well, said a voice Kira recognized immediately. Marcus Holt stepped forward, his smirk even wider than before. Look who made it in. Must have lowered the standards this year. Ignore him, Sarah whispered to Kira. He's been talking trash since we arrived. Don't worry, Kira replied. I've dealt with worse. The first training exercise was scheduled for the next morning. Recruits were divided into teams and sent into a massive simulation complex to complete a series of objectives. Kira was assigned to Team 7, along with Marcus, James Chen, Sarah Park, and 4 other recruits. The simulation was simple in concept. Their team had to navigate through an enemy-held facility, rescue a captured pilot, and escape before time ran out. Points would be awarded for speed, accuracy, and teamwork. From the beginning, Marcus made it clear that Kira was not welcome on his team. Listen up, he said, assuming command that no one had given him. Chen and I will take point. Jackson and Torres, you cover our flanks. Park, you stay in the middle and try not to get killed. And you. He looked at Kira with contempt. Just stay out of the way. Don't touch anything. Don't do anything. Just follow and try not to screw this up for the rest of us. Kira said nothing. She had learned that actions spoke louder than words. The simulation began. Their team moved into the virtual facility, which looked like an abandoned industrial complex. Warning lights flashed red. Distant alarms sounded. Somewhere in the building, the simulated pilot was waiting to be rescued. Marcus led them down the main corridor, walking right into the first ambush. Simulated enemy soldiers appeared from hidden positions, opening fire with stun weapons. Marcus dove for cover, shouting orders that made no sense. James tried to coordinate a response, but the team was too scattered, too confused. In the chaos, Kira moved. She had spent her childhood learning to navigate the dark, dangerous tunnels beneath Colony Nexus 7. She knew how to move quietly, how to stay hidden, how to find paths that others missed. While Marcus was yelling and James was trying to rally the team, Kira slipped through a maintenance hatch that no one else had noticed. She found herself in a network of service tunnels that ran throughout the facility. Moving quickly but silently, she made her way past the enemy positions that had pinned down her team. She found the room where the captured pilot was being held, neutralized the 2 guards with quick, precise strikes, and freed the hostage. "Who are you?" the simulated pilot asked. "Your rescue," Kira replied. "Follow me." She led the pilot through the service tunnels, emerging behind the enemy forces that were still focused on her pinned-down team. Using a combination of distraction and surprise, she managed to take out 6 enemy soldiers from behind, breaking the ambush and allowing her team to advance. They completed the mission with time to spare. After the simulation, the instructor reviewed their performance. He was a grizzled veteran named Lieutenant Commander Foster, who had lost an arm fighting the Kraloks and had been reassigned to training duties. "Team 7, he announced. "You completed the mission successfully. However, your performance was far from optimal. Cadet Applicant Holt. Your leadership was reckless and nearly got your entire team eliminated in the first 5 minutes." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Foster silenced him with a look. Cadet Applicant Vance, on the other hand, showed exceptional initiative and tactical awareness. She single-handedly rescued the hostage and broke the enemy ambush. Her actions saved the mission. The other recruits stared at Kira with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. All except Marcus, whose face was twisted with anger. "That's not fair," Marcus said. "She abandoned the team. She went off on her own without authorization. That's not how real soldiers operate. Real soldiers adapt to the situation," Foster replied. "Real soldiers find ways to complete the mission when everything goes wrong. Real soldiers don't sit behind cover crying while someone else does the hard work." That night, as Kira lay in her bunk, she heard footsteps approaching. She opened her eyes to find Marcus standing over her, flanked by 2 of his friends. "You embarrassed me today," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with barely contained rage. "That's not going to happen again." "I didn't embarrass you," Kira replied, sitting up slowly. "You embarrassed yourself. I just completed the mission." Marcus's hand shot out and grabbed Kira's collar, pulling her to her feet. "Listen to me. You mining trash. You don't belong here. You're only here because the brass wanted to show how progressive they are. A diversity hire. A token. The moment you fall behind in classes, and you will, they'll ship you back to whatever hole you crawled out of." Kira could have fought back. She could have broken Marcus's grip and put him on the ground in seconds. But she knew that would only make things worse. She needed to graduate from this program, needed to become a soldier. Getting expelled for fighting wouldn't help anyone. "Are you done?" she asked calmly. Marcus's grip tightened. "I'm going to make your life here a living hell. Every day. Every exercise. Every moment. I'm going to make you wish you had never been born. Then you're going to be very busy," Kira replied. "Because I'm not going anywhere." Marcus released her with a shove that sent her stumbling back into her bunk. He and his friends walked away, laughing. Sarah Park appeared from the darkness, her face pale with concern. "Are you okay?" Kira rubbed her neck where Marcus had grabbed her. "I've had worse. You should report him. And prove everyone right. Prove that women can't handle the pressure. That we run to authority every time someone is mean to us." Kira shook her head. "No, I'll handle this my way." "What way is that?" Kira lay back down and closed her eyes. "I'm going to be better than him. Better than all of them. I'm going to graduate at the top of this class, and then I'm going to make sure everyone remembers my name." Sarah looked at her with a mixture of admiration and doubt. "That's quite a goal." "It's not a goal," Kira replied. "It's a promise." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Kira's life, and that was saying something for someone who had survived 3 tunnel collapses and a methane explosion. Every morning, she woke up 2 hours before the other recruits to study. The academic work that came easily to people with proper educations was a constant struggle for her. Physics, chemistry, tactical theory, alien biology, weapons systems, stellar navigation. Every subject was a mountain she had to climb with bare hands while others took the elevator. During the day, she excelled in physical training. The obstacle courses, combat simulations, and endurance tests that left other recruits gasping for air were almost relaxing compared to the labor she had done in the mines. While Marcus and his friends complained about sore muscles and early mornings, Kira pushed herself harder and harder. But Marcus kept his promise to make her life hell. He accidentally tripped her during formation runs. He spread rumors about her among the other recruits. He sabotaged her equipment during training exercises. He mocked her every time she struggled with academic work, calling her stupid and worthless in front of everyone. The worst part was that many of the instructors seemed to agree with him. They held Kira to impossible standards, criticized her for mistakes they ignored in male recruits, and made it clear they expected her to fail. Only Lieutenant Commander Foster and Sergeant Major Williams treated her fairly. They saw something in her that others missed, and they pushed her to reach her full potential. 1 month into training, Kira faced her biggest challenge yet, the Zero-G combat qualification. Fighting in zero gravity was completely different from fighting on the ground. Without weight to anchor you, every punch and kick sent you spinning. Without friction, you couldn't run or dodge the way you were used to. The recruits who excelled in normal combat often floundered in Zero-G, while recruits who understood physics and momentum had a significant advantage. Kira had never experienced zero gravity before arriving at the academy. The mining colonies where she grew up had artificial gravity, and she had never been on a spaceship or station that didn't. This was completely new territory for her. Her first Zero-G training session was a disaster. She pushed off too hard and slammed into the ceiling. She tried to throw a punch and sent herself spinning out of control. She grabbed a handhold wrong and nearly broke her wrist. Marcus watched from the observation deck, laughing loudly enough for everyone to hear. Look at the miner's daughter. Can't even handle floating. Maybe she should go back to the dirt where she belongs. Kira ignored him. She had faced bigger challenges than this. She would figure it out. For the next 2 weeks, she spent every free moment in the Zero-G training chamber. She practiced basic movements until they became second nature. She studied the physics of momentum transfer until she could calculate trajectories in her head. She watched recordings of experienced Zero-G fighters and analyzed their techniques. By the time the qualification test arrived, she was ready. The test was simple. Recruits were paired up for one-on-one combat in a Zero-G arena. The first to score 3 clean hits on their opponent would advance to the next round. Those who failed would have to retake the test or be dropped from the program. When the pairings were announced, Kira found herself facing Marcus in the first round. Finally, Marcus said, grinning like a predator, "I've been waiting for this. I'm going to enjoy putting you in your place." The arena was a spherical chamber, 20 meters across, with handholds scattered across every surface. Kira and Marcus floated to opposite sides and waited for the signal to begin. When the bell sounded, Marcus immediately launched himself toward her, fists raised for a devastating opening strike. It was exactly what Kira expected him to do. Instead of meeting him head-on, she pushed off at an angle, letting his momentum carry him past her while she caught his trailing arm. Using his own speed against him, she redirected him into a spin that sent him tumbling out of control. Before he could recover, she had scored her first hit, a clean strike to his shoulder. Marcus's face turned red with rage. He stabilized himself and came at her again, more carefully this time. But Kira had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. She had analyzed his fighting style, identified his weaknesses, and developed counters for every attack he might use. The second hit came 30 seconds later, a kick to his midsection that sent him bouncing off the arena wall. The third hit came less than a minute after that, a combination that ended with her elbow connecting solidly with his chest plate. The match was over. Kira had won without taking a single hit. As she floated to the exit, she heard Marcus's voice behind her, trembling with fury. "This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over." Kira didn't look back. She was already thinking about her next challenge. 3 months into training, the first real crisis struck. Kira was in the middle of a physics exam when the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the academy. An announcement came over the speakers. The voice of Admiral Chen himself. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We have detected an unidentified vessel approaching Terra Station Prime. All recruits are to remain in their quarters until further notice." The exam was immediately canceled. Recruits were herded back to their barracks while the academy went into lockdown. Through the viewports, they could see the lights of fleet ships powering up their engines, moving to intercept the approaching vessel. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear. I don't know, James replied. But if they're scrambling the fleet, it's not good. For hours, they waited. Rumors spread through the barracks like wildfire. Some said it was a Kralox invasion fleet. Others said it was a diplomatic ship from one of humanity's allies. Still others whispered about mysterious signals and unexplained phenomena. Finally, word came down from command. The vessel had been identified as a Kralox scout ship, heavily damaged and drifting, without power. The fleet had captured it and was towing it to a secure facility for investigation. But that wasn't the end of it. The scout ship's computers contained valuable intelligence about Kralox fleet movements and battle plans. Analysis revealed that the Kralox were preparing a massive offensive against human colonies in the Outer Rim. Millions of civilians were at risk. Admiral Chen called an emergency assembly of all recruits and staff. The situation is dire, he announced, his voice heavy with the weight of command. Our regular forces are spread thin across human space. We don't have enough ships or soldiers to mount a proper defense of all threatened colonies. Therefore, effective immediately, all recruits with 3 or more months of training will be eligible for accelerated graduation and immediate deployment. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Accelerated graduation meant skipping months of training. Immediate deployment meant being sent to the front lines before they were truly ready. This is voluntary, Admiral Chen continued. No one will be forced to join this mission. Those who choose to remain will continue their training as normal, but those who volunteer will be given a chance to serve humanity in its hour of need. Kira didn't hesitate. She was one of the first to step forward. Marcus, to his credit, also volunteered. So did James, Sarah, and dozens of other recruits. Whatever their differences, they all understood that humanity needed them. The next week was a blur of accelerated training and preparation. Recruits were rushed through weapons qualification, tactical briefings, and survival training. They were assigned to ships and units, given ranks and responsibilities far beyond what their experience warranted. Kira was assigned to the TDV Relentless, a destroyer-class vessel commanded by Captain Helena Cross. She would serve as part of the ship's marine complement, responsible for boarding actions and ground combat. On the day of departure, she stood at the viewport watching Terra Station Prime grow smaller behind them. She had arrived at the academy a nobody, a miner's daughter whom most people expected to fail. Now she was a soldier in the Terran Defense Fleet, heading toward the biggest battle humanity had faced in decades. Scared? James asked, appearing beside her. Terrified, Kira admitted. But I've been scared before. It never stopped me. James smiled. That's why they gave you the highest combat ratings in our class. You know that, right? Higher than Marcus, higher than me, higher than everyone. Kira blinked in surprise. I didn't know that. Foster told me. Said you're the best natural fighter he's seen in 20 years. Said you've got instincts that can't be taught. James shook his head in admiration. You really don't see how special you are, do you? I just do what needs to be done, Kira said simply. Same as I've always done. The voyage to the Outer Rim took 3 weeks. During that time, the recruits trained constantly, bonding with the experienced soldiers who would fight beside them. Kira learned the names and stories of her fellow Marines, discovered that many of them had come from backgrounds as humble as hers, and began to feel like she belonged for the first time in her life. Only Marcus remained hostile. He avoided her when possible and glared at her when avoidance wasn't an option. But in the close quarters of a warship, petty grudges seemed less important than survival. When they finally arrived at the colony world of New Harmony, the situation was worse than anyone had expected. The Kralox had already landed. Their insectoid warriors were sweeping through the colony's cities, slaughtering civilians, and capturing those who couldn't escape. The colony's defense forces had been overwhelmed within hours. Millions of people were trapped, waiting for rescue that many feared would never come. Captain Cross called all hands to the briefing room. Our mission is evacuation, she announced, highlighting targets on a holographic map. Fleet Command has designated 3 evacuation points in the capital city. Marine units will secure these points and hold them while transport ships extract civilians. We're looking at a minimum of 48 hours on the ground. Possibly longer. She paused, her face grim. I won't lie to you. This is going to be hell. The Kralox have numerical superiority in air control. We'll be fighting against the odds from the moment we hit dirt. Not all of us are going to make it back. No one spoke. The reality of what they were facing hung heavy in the air. Deploy in 1 hour, Captain Cross concluded. May fortune favor the brave. As the Marines prepared for deployment, Kira felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Sergeant Major Williams standing behind her. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. Couldn't let the recruits have all the fun, Williams replied with a grim smile. Listen, Vance, I've been watching you since the day you walked into that recruitment center. You've got something special, something that can't be trained or taught. When we hit the ground, I want you to trust your instincts. Don't second-guess yourself. Don't hold back. You were born for this. What if I'm not good enough? Kira asked, voicing the fear that had haunted her since she first applied to the academy. You are, Williams said firmly. You've always been good enough. The only person who ever doubted that was you. He walked away, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts. An hour later, she was in a drop pod, plummeting toward the surface of New Harmony. The pod shook and rattled as it tore through the atmosphere, heat shields glowing red-hot from friction. Around her, other pods fell like meteors, carrying the Marines who would fight beside her. When the pod slammed into the ground and the doors blew open, Kira emerged into chaos. The city was burning. Smoke filled the sky, turning day into twilight. Explosions echoed in the distance. Screams rose from every direction, and everywhere she looked, she saw the Kraloks. Chitinous horrors with too many limbs and mandibles dripping with acidic saliva. She had trained for this moment. She had prepared for this moment. But nothing could truly prepare a person for the reality of war. A Kraloks warrior charged toward her, its claws raised for a killing blow. Time seemed to slow down. Kira saw every detail of the alien. The compound eyes that glittered with alien intelligence. The segmented body armor that could deflect most weapons. The weak points at the joints that were the only vulnerability. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She raised her rifle, aimed for the joint where the Kraloks' head met its body, and fired. The alien fell dead at her feet. Kira Vance's war had begun. The first night on New Harmony was the longest of Kira's life. Her squad had been assigned to secure Evacuation Point Alpha, a hospital complex in the heart of the capital city. Thousands of civilians had gathered there, hoping the Terran Marines could protect them from the Kraloks horde that swept through the streets. The aliens came in waves. Every few hours, a new assault would begin. Kraloks warriors would emerge from the smoke and shadows, their inhuman shrieks filling the air as they charged toward the hospital's barricades. The Marines would open fire, plasma rifles cutting bright lines through the darkness. Some aliens fell, but more always came. By dawn, Kira had lost count of how many she had killed. Her arms ached from the constant recoil of her weapon. Her throat was raw from shouting orders and warnings. Her armor was splattered with alien blood that smelled like rotten eggs and burning metal. But she was still standing. Fall back to secondary positions, Sergeant Williams shouted as another wave of Kraloks pushed through a gap in their defenses. Move, move, move. Kira covered the retreat, her rifle spitting death at any alien that got too close. She saw James taking down a Kraloks warrior that had nearly reached a group of fleeing civilians. She saw Sarah pulling a wounded Marine to safety while plasma fire exploded around her. And she saw Marcus. He was frozen. A Kraloks warrior had cornered him against a wall, its mandibles clicking with anticipation. Marcus's rifle had jammed, and his hands were shaking too badly to clear it. Fear had paralyzed him completely. Kira didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward them, vaulting over debris and dodging enemy fire. At the last moment, just before the Kraloks' claws could tear Marcus apart, she slammed into the alien from the side. The impact sent all three of them sprawling. But Kira recovered first. She drew her combat knife, a 20-centimeter blade of hardened ceramic, and plunged it into the soft tissue beneath the Kraloks' mandibles. The alien thrashed once and went still. Marcus stared at her with wide eyes, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You saved me. Clear your rifle and get moving, Kira said coldly. We're not done yet. She didn't wait for his response. There was still a battle to fight. By the time the sun rose fully, the Kraloks had pulled back to regroup. The Marines took the opportunity to rest, tend to their wounded, and reinforce their positions. Of the 100 soldiers who had landed at Evacuation Point Alpha, 17 were dead and another 30 were wounded too badly to fight. Kira sat with her back against a concrete barrier, drinking water from a battered canteen. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but she could still feel the phantom weight of every trigger pull, every killing blow. "Thank you." She looked up to find Marcus standing over her, his face a mess of conflicting emotions. Pride warred with gratitude, shame with resentment. "You saved my life," he continued, the words clearly difficult for him to say. I don't understand why. I've been terrible to you since the day we met." "Yes, you have," Kira agreed. "So why save me? You could have let that thing kill me. Nobody would have blamed you." Kira considered the question for a moment. "Because you're a soldier, because you're human, because we need every fighter we can get." She paused. "And because I'm not like you, I don't judge people by what they are. I judge them by what they do." Marcus had no response to that. He stood there for a long moment, then finally nodded and walked away. From that day forward, he never spoke another cruel word to her. The evacuation of New Harmony took 5 days instead of the planned 48 hours. The Kraylocks threw everything they had at the evacuation points, wave after wave of warriors supported by armored vehicles and airstrikes. The fleet above engaged the alien ships in a desperate battle for control of the sky. Kira fought in every major engagement. She led counterattacks when the perimeter was breached. She dragged wounded comrades to safety under fire. She held positions that should have been impossible to hold, inspiring the soldiers around her to fight harder than they ever had before. On the 3rd day, Sergeant Major Williams was wounded. A Kraylock's plasma bolt caught him in the chest, burning through his armor and searing the flesh beneath. He collapsed in the middle of an open courtyard, exposed to enemy fire from 3 directions. Without thinking, Kira sprinted into the kill zone. Plasma bolts screamed past her head. The air crackled with deadly energy. Every instinct told her to take cover, to save herself, to let someone else take the risk. She ignored all of it. She reached Williams, grabbed him by the straps of his armor, and began dragging him toward cover. He was easily twice her weight. But adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she had. Step by step, inch by inch, she pulled him through the hell of enemy fire. A plasma bolt grazed her arm, burning through her armor and leaving a smoking wound. She didn't stop. Another bolt hit the ground at her feet, spraying her with molten debris. She didn't stop. A Kraylock's warrior emerged from behind a burned-out vehicle, charging directly at her with claws extended. She drew her sidearm and put 3 rounds through its skull without breaking stride. She didn't stop. When she finally reached cover, she was bleeding from 6 wounds and barely able to stand. But Williams was alive. "Medic!" she screamed, her voice raw. "We need a medic here now." The medics came running. They stabilized Williams and carried him to the field hospital. He would survive, they said. He would fight again. Kira slumped against a wall, exhaustion and blood loss catching up with her at last. Before she passed out, she saw James kneeling beside her, his face pale with concern. "You're insane," he said. "You know that, right?" "Maybe," she managed to whisper. But it worked. Then everything went dark. She woke up in the field hospital, her wounds bandaged and her body pumped full of synthetic stimulants. The battle was still raging outside. She had only been unconscious for a few hours. "You need to rest," the doctor told her. "You've lost a lot of blood." "People are dying out there," Kira replied, already trying to sit up. "I can rest when they're safe." The doctor knew better than to argue with that look in her eyes. The final assault came on the 5th day. The Kraylocks had massed their remaining forces for one last push to overwhelm the evacuation points before the last transports could escape. Every soldier who could stand was called to the barricades. Kira stood at the center of the defense line, her wounds barely healed and her body running on willpower alone. Around her, Marines and surviving colonists prepared for the fight of their lives. Captain Cross appeared on the communications channel, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "All units, be advised. This is the final wave. We hold here for 2 more hours, and every civilian makes it off this rock. Fail, and 10,000 people die." She paused, then added, "It's been an honor serving with you all." The Kraylocks came out of the smoke like a living tide. Thousands of warriors, supported by walkers and artillery, advanced toward the human positions with relentless purpose. The sound of their approach was like nothing Kira had ever heard. A chittering roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Fire at will, Sergeant Williams shouted, his voice weak but determined. He had insisted on returning to the line despite his wounds. Make every shot count. The Marines opened up with everything they had. Plasma rifles cut swathes through the enemy ranks. Heavy weapons brought down walkers in spectacular explosions. Grenades turned the advance into a field of craters and alien corpses. But still they came. The first breach happened on the left flank. A group of Kralox warriors broke through a weakened section of the barricade and began slaughtering the defenders. Kira saw it happening and moved without conscious thought. She grabbed a fallen Marine's heavy weapon, a plasma repeater designed for 2 people to carry, and charged toward the breach alone. The weight of the weapon would have been impossible for her just months ago, but months of combat had transformed her body into something harder than steel. She reached the breach and opened fire. The plasma repeater roared, sending a continuous stream of superheated energy into the Kralox mass. Aliens fell by the dozen, their bodies torn apart by the devastating firepower, but the weapon was draining her strength. Her arms burned with exertion, her vision blurred from exhaustion. She could feel herself slipping, failing, falling. Then James was beside her, adding his fire to hers. Then Sarah. Then Marcus. One by one, other Marines joined the defense, drawn by her example. Together, they held the breach. The battle raged for 2 hours that felt like 2 centuries. Every minute was an eternity of fire and blood, and desperate fighting. Kira lost track of how many aliens she killed, how many times she nearly died, how many comrades fell beside her. But when the all-clear finally sounded, she was still standing. The last transport had escaped. 10,000 civilians were safe. The Kralox had been broken. As the surviving Marines were evacuated to orbit, Kira looked back at the burning city through the window of the shuttle. She had arrived on New Harmony as an untested recruit, still doubting whether she belonged among real soldiers. She left as something else entirely. She didn't know it yet, but the Battle of New Harmony would be talked about for generations. And at the center of every story would be the young woman who held the line when all seemed lost. The journey back to human space took 2 weeks. Kira spent most of it in the medical bay, recovering from her wounds. The doctors told her she had sustained injuries that should have killed her 3 times over. They couldn't explain how she had kept fighting. Kira could explain it. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Quitting was a choice she refused to make. When people needed her, she found strength she didn't know she had. Sergeant Major Williams visited her regularly. His wounds had healed faster than the doctors expected, and he walked with only a slight limp now. "You know," he said one day, settling into the chair beside her bed, "when I recommended you for the program, the admirals thought I was crazy. A miner's daughter with no education, no connections, no resources. They said you'd wash out in the first month. They almost weren't wrong," Kira admitted. "The academics nearly killed me." Williams laughed. "The academics would have killed most of us. That's not what makes a soldier." He looked at her with something like pride. "What you did on New Harmony, that's what makes a soldier. That's what makes a hero." Kira shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly my point. Most people, when they're terrified and exhausted and outnumbered and facing certain death, they freeze. They give up. They look for someone else to solve the problem." Williams shook his head. "You don't. You never have. You see what needs to be done, and you do it. No hesitation, no excuses, no kit. That's just survival," Kira said. "In the mines, you either learned to think on your feet, or you died. There was no one else to solve your problems, no one coming to save you. You saved yourself or you didn't get saved at all. That's what makes you different from these soft kids who grew up in comfortable stations with their comfortable lives. They never had to face real adversity. They never had to push past the limits they thought they had." Williams leaned forward. "You've been pushing past limits since before you could walk. That's why you're the best soldier I've ever trained." Kira didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. When the fleet arrived at Terra Station Prime, the Marines were greeted as heroes. News of the evacuation had spread across human space, and millions were eager to celebrate the soldiers who had saved New Harmony. But for Kira, the celebration was short-lived. 3 days after their return, she was summoned to the office of Admiral Chen. The commander of the recruitment program sat behind his desk, his face unreadable as Kira entered and saluted. "At ease, Private Vance," he said. "Please, sit down." Kira sat, wondering what this was about. Had she done something wrong? Was she being discharged? "I've read the reports from New Harmony," Admiral Chen continued. "I've spoken with Captain Cross, Sergeant Major Williams, and a dozen other officers and soldiers who served alongside you. Do you know what they all said?" "No, sir. They said you were the best they'd ever seen. Cross said you have the tactical instincts of a 30-year veteran. Williams said you're the most naturally gifted soldier he's ever trained. Your squad mates said they would follow you into hell itself." Chen paused. "That's quite a reputation for someone who's technically still a probationary recruit." Kira's heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No. You were doing much more than your job. You were doing the impossible." Chen reached into his desk and pulled out a small case. "The Fleet Command has reviewed your performance during the evacuation. Based on the evidence, they have approved an immediate battlefield promotion to the rank of sergeant." He opened the case, revealing the stripes of a sergeant's rank. Kira stared at them, hardly believing what she was seeing. "Sir, I've only been in the fleet for 4 months, and in those 4 months, you've accomplished more than most soldiers accomplish in their entire careers. The promotion is well earned." Chen paused, then added, "There's more. Command is creating a new special operations unit to handle high-priority missions against the Kraloks. They want you to be part of it." "Special operations?" Kira asked, her mind reeling. "The best of the best. Soldiers who can do what regular units cannot. Soldiers who can turn the tide of battles, rescue hostages behind enemy lines, assassinate enemy commanders." Chen's eyes were intense. "It will be the most dangerous, demanding assignment in the fleet. The mortality rate for special operations soldiers is over 60%. But if you succeed, you'll be in a position to make a real difference in this war." Kira thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "I'm in." Chen smiled slightly. "I expected nothing less. Report to Training Complex Delta in 48 hours. Your new unit designation is Shadow Squadron." Kira saluted and turned to leave. But at the door, Chen's voice stopped her. "Vance, for what it's worth, I was wrong about you. When you first applied, I thought you were a waste of resources. I thought you'd fail and prove that the traditionalists were right about women in combat. I was an idiot." He met her eyes. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You've earned your place, 10 times over." "Thank you, sir," Kira said. "But with respect, I never needed anyone's permission to belong. I just needed the chance to prove myself." She left before he could respond. Shadow Squadron was everything Kira had hoped for, and everything she had feared. The training was brutal, pushing soldiers to their absolute limits and then demanding more. Wake-up calls at random hours, survival exercises in deadly environments, combat simulations designed to cause maximum stress and minimum rest. Many candidates washed out in the first week. More followed in the weeks after, but Kira thrived. The skills she had learned in the mines, the instincts she had developed in the academy, the experience she had gained on New Harmony all came together into something formidable. She adapted to challenges that broke other soldiers. She excelled in areas where experts struggled. She became a weapon that could think and improvise and overcome. Her instructors noticed, her fellow candidates noticed, and the commander of Shadow Squadron definitely noticed. Commander Elena Varro was a legend in the Terran Defense Fleet. She had led special operations for 15 years, completing missions that regular forces considered suicide. She had killed more Kraloks than anyone in human history. She had been wounded 7 times and left for dead twice. But she always came back. When she looked at Kira, she saw something familiar. "You remind me of myself," Varro said one day, after watching Kira complete a training exercise in record time. "When I started in this business, everyone told me I couldn't do it. Women weren't built for special operations, they said. Too weak, too emotional, too fragile." "What did you tell them?" Kira asked. "Nothing. I just did the job." Varro smiled, showing teeth. That shut them up faster than any argument ever could. Shadow Squadron's first mission came 6 weeks into Kira's training. They were deployed to a remote mining colony that had been overrun by Kraloks forces. Intelligence suggested that the aliens were using the colony as a staging ground for attacks on nearby human settlements. Shadow Squadron's job was to infiltrate the colony, gather intelligence, and if possible, destroy the enemy command structure. The team consisted of 6 soldiers: Commander Varro, Kira, James, and 3 veterans of previous special operations. They were inserted by stealth shuttle, landing 5 kilometers from the colony's edge under cover of darkness. The approach took 3 hours. They moved silently through rocky terrain, avoiding Kraylock's patrols and sensor sweeps. Kira found herself falling into old habits from the mines, navigating by feel and instinct through passages that seemed designed to confuse. When they reached the colony's perimeter, they paused to observe. The place was crawling with aliens. Thousands of Kraylock's warriors moved through the streets, transporting equipment and supplies. Heavy weapons had been set up at strategic points. The colony's original inhabitants were nowhere to be seen. Bigger force than intelligence suggested. Varro muttered. "This isn't a staging ground. This is a full invasion force. We need to warn command," one of the veterans said. "We will. But first, we complete the mission." Varro studied the colony layout, her eyes tracing possible routes. "Kira, you have experience with mining installations. What's your assessment?" Kira looked at the colony with new eyes. The layout was similar to Nexus 7, with surface buildings connected to underground facilities. She could see ventilation shafts, maintenance hatches, and service tunnels that most people would miss. "There's an underground network," she said. "Mining colonies always have one. If we can access it, we can move through the installation without being detected. Can you find an entrance?" Kira pointed to a seemingly innocuous building near the colony's edge. "That's an emergency exit. The Kraylocks probably don't know it's there. Mining companies hide them to prevent theft." Varro nodded. "Take point. Lead us in." The next hour was the tensest of Kira's life. She led the team through a maze of underground passages, relying on her knowledge of mining installations to navigate. Several times they had to hide in darkness as Kraylock's patrols passed inches away. Once, a warrior came so close that Kira could smell its acidic breath. But they weren't detected. The command center was located in what had once been the colony's administrative building. Kraylock's officers clustered around holographic displays, planning their invasion. There had to be at least 50 warriors in the building, plus however many were outside. "We can't fight our way through that," James whispered. "We don't need to," Varro replied. "We plant charges, download their data, and get out before anyone knows we were here." She assigned tasks to each team member. 2 would plant explosives, 2 would secure the data. Kira and Varro would provide overwatch and handle any problems that arose. Everything went smoothly at first. The explosives were planted. The data was being downloaded. No alarms had been raised. Then everything went wrong. A Kraylock's warrior stumbled upon one of the veterans while he was setting a charge. The alien shrieked a warning before dying, alerting every enemy in the building to the human presence. "Mission compromised," Varro shouted. "Evacuate now." They ran, fighting their way through suddenly alert defenders. Plasma bolts screamed through the corridors. Explosions rocked the building as some of the planted charges detonated prematurely. Kira found herself separated from the group, cut off by collapsed debris and enemy fire. She could hear fighting nearby but couldn't reach her teammates. "Varro, this is Vance. I'm cut off. What's your status?" Static answered her. The communications were jammed. She was on her own. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm her. She was alone, surrounded by enemies, with no backup and no extraction plan. Then she remembered the mines. She remembered the methane explosion that had killed her father. She remembered leading 8 survivors through collapsed tunnels for 3 days. She had been alone before. She had survived before. She would survive again. Moving quickly, she found an access hatch to the service tunnels and descended into darkness. The Kraylocks probably didn't know these passages existed. If she could navigate them, she could find another way out. For 2 hours, she crawled through passages barely wide enough for her body. Several times she had to backtrack when tunnels collapsed or ended in dead ends. Her wounds from New Harmony ached from the confined movements, but she kept going. Finally, she emerged on the surface, half a kilometer from the colony's edge. The building she had infiltrated was in flames, and she could hear distant explosions as the remaining charges detonated. She found her teammates 3 hours later, at the designated rendezvous point. All had survived, though 2 were wounded. "Vance," Varro exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "We thought we'd lost you." "It takes more than that to stop me," Kira replied. The data they had gathered proved invaluable. It revealed the Kraloks' entire battle plan for the sector, including the locations of their supply lines and the identities of their key commanders. Fleet Command used the intelligence to launch a devastating counteroffensive that destroyed the invasion force before it could threaten any human colonies. Shadow Squadron received commendations for their success. But more importantly, Kira had proven herself in the eyes of the most elite soldiers in the fleet. Over the next 2 years, she went on dozens of missions. She rescued hostages. She destroyed enemy installations. She assassinated Kraloks commanders whose deaths threw entire fleets into chaos. She became a legend in the shadows, feared by enemies who never even knew her name. The Kraloks began calling her the Shadow Devil. They didn't know she was human, let alone female. They only knew that wherever she went, their warriors died and their plans crumbled. But the war was far from over, and the darkest chapter was yet to come. The turning point came during a mission to the Kraloks' homeworld system. Intelligence had identified a research facility where the aliens were developing a new weapon, something capable of destroying entire planets. Shadow Squadron was ordered to infiltrate the facility and sabotage the project. It was supposed to be a straightforward mission. Get in, plant explosives, get out. Nothing about it was straightforward. The facility was a fortress, protected by layer upon layer of defenses. The team lost 3 members just getting inside. The explosives malfunctioned, forcing them to improvise alternatives. The extraction shuttle was shot down, stranding them on an alien world with no way home. For 5 days, the survivors fought their way across hostile terrain, pursued by thousands of Kraloks warriors. One by one, they fell. Commander Varro was wounded so badly she could barely walk. James was killed holding a bridge so the others could escape. When they finally reached the secondary extraction point, only 3 remained: Kira, Varro, and one other soldier named Miller. The shuttle that picked them up was barely holding together. The pilot was wounded, and the engines were failing. They made it to orbit by sheer willpower and luck. But the mission had succeeded. The research facility was destroyed. The planet-killing weapon was never completed. Millions of lives had been saved. At what cost? Kira wondered as she watched James's body being carried off the shuttle. At what cost? The loss of James hit her harder than she expected. He had been her first friend in the fleet, one of the few people who had believed in her from the beginning. His death left a hole in her heart that nothing could fill, but she didn't have time to grieve. The war was escalating, and Shadow Squadron was needed more than ever. Kira was promoted to lieutenant and given command of her own team. She selected soldiers who reminded her of herself, people who had been underestimated and overlooked, people who had something to prove. Among them was a young man named David whose right arm had been replaced by a prosthetic after a Kraloks attack. Military regulations said he couldn't serve in combat roles. Kira didn't care about regulations. There was Maria, who had grown up in the slums of a colony world and joined the military to escape poverty. The officers who trained her said she was too undisciplined, too rough around the edges. Kira saw a fighter who didn't know how to quit. There was Chen Yuki, no relation to James, who had been discharged from regular service for punching a superior officer who had gotten her squad killed through incompetence. Kira read the reports and decided the officer had deserved worse. And there was Elena, a technical specialist who had been passed over for promotion 6 times because she was too aggressive and not a team player. Kira recognized a kindred spirit immediately. Together, they became the most effective special operations team in the fleet. They completed mission after mission, striking fear into the hearts of Kraloks commanders. The Shadow Devil had become something worse. A pack of devils, hunting in the darkness. 3 years into the war, the Kraloks made their most audacious move yet. They launched a surprise attack on Terra Station Prime itself, the heart of human civilization. The assault came without warning. A massive Kraloks fleet dropped out of hyperspace just hours from the station, having somehow bypassed all early warning systems. The station's defenses were overwhelmed within minutes. Alien warriors began boarding operations. Kira and her team were on leave when the attack began. They were in a bar near the academy, celebrating Maria's birthday, when the alarms started screaming. All personnel. This is not a drill. Enemy forces are boarding the station. All combat-capable individuals are ordered to report to defensive positions immediately. They didn't hesitate. They grabbed their weapons and moved. The next 12 hours were a nightmare. Kralok's warriors flooded through the station, killing everyone they encountered. Civilians fled in panic. Soldiers fell, trying to hold them back. The grand halls of Terra Station Prime, which had symbolized humanity's triumph for generations, ran red with blood. Kira led her team through the chaos, fighting their way toward the station's command center. If they could reach Admiral Chen, they could coordinate a proper defense. If they couldn't, everything was lost. They found Chen in his office, wounded but still alive. A dozen Kralok's bodies surrounded him, testament to his own combat skills. "Vance," he gasped. "Thank God. The station's defenses are compromised. We need to retake the shield generators or the fleet can't hold the alien ships off." "Where are the generators?" "Sector 7. The aliens have it locked down tight." Chen coughed blood. "I've sent 3 teams. None of them made it through." Kira looked at her team. They were battered and exhausted, but their eyes burned with determination. "We'll make it through," she said. The journey to Sector 7 was a running battle. Every corridor was contested, every junction a potential ambush. Kira's team moved with precision born of years of fighting together, covering angles and eliminating threats with deadly efficiency. But even they couldn't avoid casualties. David took a plasma bolt to his prosthetic arm, melting the circuitry and leaving him unable to fight. He had to be left behind with a group of civilians they had rescued along the way. "Go," he told Kira, his voice tight with pain. "Save the station. I'll keep these people safe." She clasped his remaining hand briefly, then moved on. The shield generators were guarded by at least 100 Kralok's warriors and several heavy weapons platforms. Getting through them conventionally was impossible, but Kira had never done anything conventionally. "There's a maintenance passage that runs under the generator room," she said, studying the station schematics on her tactical display. "It's tight. Barely big enough for a person, but it should put us right under the main power coupling. 1 person could fit through," Maria said. "Maybe 2. The rest of us would have to provide a distraction. A distraction that would get us all killed," Chen Yuki added grimly. Kira nodded. "I know. That's why I'm going alone." "Like hell you are," Elena said. "If you're going in there, so am I." "Elena, don't Elena me. You need someone to cover your back, and I'm the best shot on this team. We go together, or we don't go at all." Kira wanted to argue, but she knew Elena was right. She nodded. The others would create a distraction, drawing the Kralok's defenders away from the generators long enough for Kira and Elena to complete their mission. It was a desperate plan with little chance of success, but it was the only plan they had. Maria, Chen Yuki, and the 3 other remaining team members took positions on the opposite side of the generator complex. On Kira's signal, they opened fire with everything they had, filling the corridor with plasma bolts and grenades. The Kralok's responded immediately, turning their heavy weapons toward the new threat. In the chaos, Kira and Elena slipped into the maintenance passage. The tunnel was as tight as Kira had feared, barely wide enough for them to crawl single file. Decades of neglect had left it filled with debris and sticky with unknown substances. More than once, they had to squeeze through gaps that seemed too small for human bodies. But they made it. They emerged in a service room directly beneath the main generator. Through a floor grating, they could see the massive machines that powered the station's shields. They could also see the Kralok's technicians who were sabotaging them. "We have to act fast," Elena whispered. "Those generators go offline. The fleet loses its protection." Kira nodded. She pulled a pair of grenades from her belt and armed them. "On my mark." We go through the grating. You take the ones on the left. I take the right. No hesitation. No mercy. Understood. They burst through the grating like demons from the underworld. The Kralok's technicians barely had time to react before grenades detonated in their midst. Kira and Elena followed the explosions, rifles firing, cutting down survivors with cold precision. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. The generator room was secured. Elena rushed to the control panels, her fingers flying over the interfaces. "Damage isn't too bad. I can restore power in a few minutes. Do it. I'll cover the entrance." Kira took position at the door, watching for enemy reinforcements. She could hear fighting in the distance, her team still engaging the Kralox defenders. She hoped they were still alive. She prayed they were still alive. "Power restored," Elena shouted. "Shields are coming back online." Almost immediately, Kira's radio crackled with Admiral Chen's voice. "All stations, shield generators are back online. The fleet is moving to engage. Hold your positions and prepare for counterattack." Relief washed over Kira, but it was short-lived. A massive Kralox warrior appeared at the entrance, bigger than any she had seen before. Its armor was decorated with kill markings, hundreds of them. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a champion. It saw Kira and charged. The next moments were a blur of desperate combat. The Kralox champion was faster and stronger than anything Kira had faced. Its claws came within inches of her throat multiple times. Its tail nearly crushed her chest. Every move she made was barely enough to avoid death. But she didn't have to win. She just had to survive long enough for help to arrive. Elena joined the fight. But even together, they could barely slow the monster down. Kira took a claw strike across her back that would have killed her if her armor hadn't absorbed most of the impact. Elena was thrown against a wall so hard it knocked her unconscious. Kira faced the champion alone. She was exhausted, wounded, outmatched. Every instinct told her she was going to die here, in this generator room, on this station she had fought so hard to protect. But she thought of her father, killed in the mines because no one bothered to maintain the safety equipment. She thought of James, killed on an alien world so that others might live. She thought of every person who had ever told her she couldn't succeed, every obstacle she had overcome, every moment she had refused to surrender. She thought of all the people on this station who would die if she failed, and something inside her changed. It was like a switch flipping, a door opening, a barrier breaking. Suddenly she could see the champion's movements before they happened. She could feel the flow of combat like a physical thing, like water in a stream. She knew exactly where to be and exactly what to do. She dodged a claw strike that should have been impossible to avoid and drove her knife into the joint of the champion's arm. She ducked under a tail sweep and planted a grenade on its back armor. She moved with a grace and speed she had never possessed before, dancing around the creature like it was standing still. The grenade detonated, blowing a hole in the champion's back. It staggered, wounded for the first time. Kira pressed her advantage. She attacked from angles the champion couldn't defend, exploiting wounds she had inflicted moments before. Each blow was precisely placed, maximizing damage while minimizing exposure. Finally, she saw her opening. The champion raised its claws for a devastating strike, leaving its throat exposed for just a fraction of a second. A fraction of a second was all she needed. Her knife flashed across the champion's throat, severing the arteries that fed its brain. The creature collapsed at her feet. Dead before it hit the ground, Kira stood over the body, breathing hard. The strange awareness that had filled her was fading, leaving her exhausted and confused about what had just happened. But there was no time to think about it. The battle for Terra Station Prime was still raging. She pulled Elena to her feet, and together they rejoined the fight. The counterattack succeeded. With the shields restored, the fleet was able to drive off the Kralox ships. Marines flooded the station, pushing the alien borders back section by section. By nightfall, the last Kralox had been killed or captured. Terra Station Prime had survived. The cost was terrible. Thousands of civilians dead, hundreds of soldiers killed. Entire sections of the station were destroyed beyond repair, but humanity had endured. And in the darkest hour, a young woman from the mines of Colony Nexus 7 had helped save them all. Kira didn't know it yet, but her legend was just beginning. The attack on Terra Station Prime changed everything. For the first time in 50 years of war, the Kralox had struck at the heart of human civilization. They had failed, but the message was clear. Nowhere was safe. The Human Federation Council convened an emergency session to discuss the crisis. Representatives from every colony, every station, every outpost gathered to decide humanity's next move. Kira was summoned to testify. She stood before the assembled leaders of human civilization, still wearing the scars from her battle with the Kralox champion. Her armor had been repaired but not replaced, and the marks of combat were clearly visible. Lieutenant Vance, the council president, began. "Your actions during the attack have been called extraordinary. You led the effort to restore the station's shields. You single-handedly killed a Kralox champion, and you continued fighting despite wounds that would have killed most soldiers. The council would like to know, how did you do it? Kira thought about the question. How could she explain what had happened in that generator room? How could she describe the strange awareness that had overtaken her? The feeling of perfect clarity and focus. I did what I had to do, she finally said. The people on this station needed protecting. I protected them, but you did more than that. You displayed abilities that our scientists say shouldn't be possible for a human. Speed, reflexes, combat awareness, far beyond normal parameters. The president leaned forward. Do you have any explanation? No, sir. I just know that when I needed to be better, I was. The council members exchanged glances. Whatever they had expected, it wasn't this simple answer. Lieutenant Vance, another counselor said. The Kralox are preparing a new offensive. Intelligence suggests they're massing the largest fleet in their history. If they succeed in their attack, humanity may not survive. The room went silent. We need a way to strike back. The counselor continued. We need to hurt them so badly they never threaten us again. Our military strategists have developed a plan, but it requires a team capable of achieving the impossible. She looked directly at Kira. It requires you. What's the mission? We've located the Kralox command hub, the nexus from which their entire war effort is coordinated. It's located deep in enemy space, protected by the most powerful defenses they have. Our plan is to insert a small team to destroy the hub and eliminate the Kralox High Command. Kira felt her heart pounding. This was the mission that could end the war. This was the moment everything had been building toward. I'll need my team, she said. You'll have whatever resources you need. The entire fleet is at your disposal. Kira nodded slowly. Then we'll do it. We'll end this war. The preparation took 3 months. Kira handpicked her team from the best soldiers in the fleet. Some were veterans of Shadow Squadron who had survived countless missions. Others were new recruits who had proven themselves in the defense of Terra Station Prime. Among them was Elena, recovered from her injuries and more determined than ever. There was Maria, who had survived the distraction assault that allowed Kira to reach the generators. There was Chen Yuki, whose aggressive style had earned her 3 more reprimands and 2 medals. And there was David, whose prosthetic arm had been replaced with an advanced combat model that made his old one look like a toy. You know, this is probably a one-way trip, Kira told them during their first briefing. The odds of us coming back are not good. We know, Maria said. We've known since you asked us to join. None of us are here because we think we're going to survive. We're here because this needs to be done. She's right, David added. For the first time in 50 years, we have a chance to end this war. A real chance. I'm not going to let that opportunity pass because I'm afraid of dying. One by one, the others voiced their agreement. They knew the risks. They accepted them. Kira felt a swell of pride for the people she served with. They were the best humanity had to offer, and they were willing to give everything for the chance at victory. All right then, she said. Let's get to work. The training was the most intense any of them had experienced. They practiced infiltration techniques until they could move through any environment unseen. They studied Kralox biology until they could identify weaknesses in any warrior. They ran combat simulations until their reactions were faster than thought. Kira pushed them hard, but she pushed herself harder. The strange ability she had discovered during the battle for Terra Station Prime had not returned, and she needed to understand it. She spent hours in meditation, trying to access that place of perfect clarity. She consulted with scientists and psychologists who studied combat performance. She read ancient texts about warrior traditions from Earth's history. Slowly, she began to understand. The ability wasn't magic or supernatural power. It was the result of years of training and experience, combined with absolute focus and determination. When she faced the Kralox champion, she had pushed past every mental barrier that usually limited human performance. She had accessed the full potential of her mind and body, potential that most people never even knew existed. The scientists called it hyperfocus, a state where the brain operated at peak efficiency, processing information faster and more accurately than normal. It was theorized but never proven, because no one had ever reliably achieved it. Kira had achieved it through sheer willpower. The question was, could she do it again? Could she teach others to do the same? She began experimenting during training sessions. She put her team under extreme stress, forcing them to fight beyond their limits. She taught them to recognize the feeling of approaching their mental barriers and to push through instead of backing off. The results were surprising. Some team members showed dramatic improvements in combat performance. Others struggled but eventually made progress. A few could access the hyper-focus state for brief periods, giving them abilities that seemed almost superhuman. By the time the mission date arrived, Kira's team was unlike anything the fleet had ever seen. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were weapons, forged in the hottest fire humanity could provide. The journey to the Kralox command hub took 2 weeks. They traveled in a stealth ship captured during a previous mission, its alien design allowing them to pass through enemy territory without raising alarms. Every day brought them deeper into Kralox space, past colonies and military installations that would have meant death if they had been detected. Kira spent most of the journey preparing. She reviewed intelligence reports, studied tactical maps, and ran mental simulations of every possible scenario. The command hub was located on a moon orbiting a gas giant, protected by orbital defenses, ground installations, and thousands of warriors. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out would be even harder. But they had one advantage. The Kralox didn't know they were coming. Every security system, every patrol route, every defense protocol was designed to stop an assault from space. No one expected a handful of humans to appear inside their most secure facility. The insertion went smoothly. They landed on the far side of the moon, in a region so inhospitable that the Kralox hadn't bothered to install sensors. From there, they traveled 20 kilometers across frozen terrain, using the moon's low gravity to cover ground quickly while conserving energy. The command hub was a massive structure built into the side of a crater. Its black walls absorbed light, making it nearly invisible against the dark lunar surface. Towers bristled with weapons. Patrol vehicles circled its perimeter. Thousands of Kralox warriors moved through its halls, coordinating the war effort against humanity. "That's a lot of bugs," David muttered as they observed from a ridge overlooking the base. "More than intelligence suggested," Elena agreed. "They must have reinforced after the attack on Terra Station Prime." Kira studied the base through her tactical scope, looking for weaknesses. The main entrance was too heavily guarded. The ventilation systems were too narrow for humans to navigate. The walls were reinforced against explosive charges. But there was one possibility. "There," she said, pointing to a section of the base where construction equipment sat idle. "They're building an expansion. The new section isn't connected to the main security grid yet. That's still inside the patrol perimeter," Chen Yuki pointed out. "I know. But if we time it right, we can slip through during the shift change when the patrols are thinnest." It was a terrible plan, with countless things that could go wrong. But it was the best plan they had. They moved at nightfall, when the gas giant's shadow plunged the moon into darkness. The alien sky was filled with stars that humanity had never seen, constellations that held no meaning for human eyes. The patrol timing was perfect. They crossed the perimeter with seconds to spare, sliding into the construction area just as the new patrol arrived. For agonizing minutes, they hid among building materials while Kralox workers passed within meters of their position. Then they were inside. The command hub's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, all designed for creatures with different body shapes than humans. They had to crawl through passages meant for the Kralox's lower castes, squeeze through ventilation shafts, and at one point climb up the outside of an elevator shaft because the car wouldn't accommodate human passengers. But they made progress. The central command chamber was located in the heart of the structure, protected by multiple layers of security. Intelligence suggested that the Kralox High Command, the leaders who directed the entire war against humanity, gathered there to coordinate operations. If Kira's team could reach that chamber and eliminate those leaders, the Kralox war machine would be thrown into chaos. The first security layer was a checkpoint manned by elite warriors. There was no way around it, so they had to go through. Kira led the assault. She burst from cover with her rifle blazing, cutting down 2 guards before they could raise the alarm. Her team followed, spreading out to engage the remaining defenders. The fight lasted 12 seconds. When it was over, 7 Kralox lay dead and not a single human had been wounded. They moved deeper, leaving the bodies behind. The second layer was a sensor grid that would detect any movement through a long corridor. Elena studied it for several minutes before identifying a flaw. The sensors were calibrated for Kralok's body heat, which was significantly lower than human body heat. If they could cool their bodies down sufficiently, they might slip through undetected. They used emergency cooling packs designed for space operations, pressing them against their skin until their body temperatures dropped dangerously low. One by one, they crossed the corridor, moving slowly to avoid generating friction heat. Maria's temperature spiked at the last moment, and for a heart-stopping second, the sensors flickered with a possible detection. But nothing happened. The system dismissed the anomaly as a malfunction. They were through. The third layer was the deadliest. A chamber filled with specialized warriors who served as the High Command's personal guard. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Each one had been selected from thousands and trained from birth for this duty. They were faster, stronger, and smarter than any Kraloks the team had faced before. There were 20 of them. "We can't fight through that," David said, his voice tight. "We have to," Kira replied. "There's no other way." She closed her eyes and reached for the place inside her where the hyperfocus lived. She thought about everyone she had lost. Her father, James, countless comrades who had given their lives in this war. She thought about everyone who would die if she failed. The civilians on Terra Station Prime, the colonists on New Harmony, the billions of humans across the galaxy who were counting on her. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed. Everything seemed to slow down. She could see the individual movements of dust particles in the air. She could hear the heartbeats of her teammates behind her. She could feel the flow of combat potential in the room, the lines of attack and defense that ordinary perception couldn't detect. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice calm and certain. "And be ready to move when I give the signal." She stepped into the chamber. The first Guardian saw her and charged, its claws extended for a killing blow. Kira sidestepped at the last moment, letting its momentum carry it past her while she drove her knife into the weak point beneath its skull. It was dead before it hit the ground. The second and third came together. She ducked under one swing and used its body as a shield against the other's attack. While they were tangled together, she put 3 rounds through both their heads. The fourth was faster than the others. It nearly caught her with a tail strike that would have crushed her spine. But she had seen it coming before it happened, felt the subtle shift in the creature's weight that telegraphed the attack. She caught the tail and used it to swing the Guardian into its companions, knocking 3 of them off balance. Her team joined the fight, inspired by her example. David's combat prosthetic delivered crushing blows that shattered alien armor. Elena's precise shots found vulnerable spots that seemed impossible to hit. Maria fought with a controlled fury that left Guardians broken at her feet. Chen Yuki moved through the battle like a dancer, flowing between enemies and striking with devastating effect. In less than 2 minutes, all 20 Guardians were dead. Kira stood in the center of the carnage, the hyper-focus slowly fading. She was exhausted, every muscle screaming with exertion. But she forced herself to keep moving. The mission wasn't over yet. The central command chamber was just ahead. They burst through the doors and found themselves face to face with the Kralok's High Command. 7 ancient creatures sat in a semicircle, surrounded by holographic displays showing the disposition of their entire fleet. They were clearly surprised by the intrusion but showed no fear. The eldest spoke in the hissing language of the Kraloks, and the translation device in Kira's armor converted its words to human speech. "So, you are the ones who have caused us so much trouble. The shadow devils who haunt our warriors' dreams." The creature studied her with compound eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. "You are smaller than I expected. Size isn't everything," Kira replied. "No, it is not." The elder rose from its seat, revealing a body covered with scars from centuries of conflict. "I am called the Eternal Voice. I have led my people for longer than your entire species has existed. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die and new ones be born. You think you can end our war with this assassination attempt? I think I can try." The Eternal Voice made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your courage is admirable. Your confidence is amusing. But you fail to understand something fundamental about my people. We do not fear death. We welcome it. Every Kraloks who falls in battle joins the eternal choir, adding their voice to the song of our species. Then you'll have a lot of new singers today." Kira raised her weapon, but before she could fire, the Eternal Voice moved with impossible speed. One of its claws knocked the rifle from her hands while another grabbed her by the throat. "I could kill you now, the elder said, its mandibles clicking inches from her face. I could end your little rebellion with a single squeeze. But I find myself curious. What drives you to face certain death? What makes you fight against odds that any rational creature would flee from? My people, Kira managed to say, despite the pressure on her throat. I fight for my people. Your people. The eternal voice seemed to consider this. Yes, I have observed this about humans. You form attachments that transcend individual survival. You sacrifice yourselves for others, even strangers. It is a weakness and a strength. It's who we are. Indeed. The elder released her, stepping back. I have watched your species for many cycles now. At first, we saw you as prey, soft creatures to be harvested and consumed, but you have surprised us. You fight with a ferocity that we did not expect. You adapt and overcome in ways that should not be possible, and you produce individuals like yourself who achieve things that seem to defy the natural order. Kira rubbed her throat, trying to understand what was happening. Why wasn't the elder killing them? I have a proposal, the eternal voice continued. The war between our peoples cannot continue indefinitely. It drains resources that both sides need for other purposes. Eventually, one of us will be destroyed, or both of us will be so weakened that some third power will rise and consume us all. What are you suggesting? An alternative. A contest, if you will. Single combat between champions. Your species against ours. If your champion wins, we withdraw our forces and seek peaceful coexistence. If our champion wins, your species surrenders and accepts our rule. The other High Command members stirred uneasily at this proposal, but the eternal voice silenced them with a gesture. You cannot speak for all of humanity, Kira said. I don't have that authority. You have the authority to fight. The rest is negotiation. The elder's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. I have seen your battles, Shadow Devil. I have watched recordings of your combat performance. You are the finest warrior your species has produced. If anyone can defeat our champion, it is you. Kira thought about it. The proposal was clearly a trap of some kind. The Kraylock's champion would be chosen specifically to defeat her. The odds were stacked against humanity from the start, but if she refused, what happened next? Her team was deep in enemy territory, surrounded by thousands of warriors. They might complete their mission, might kill the High Command, but they would almost certainly die in the process. And even if they succeeded, the war would continue. More people would die. More worlds would burn. This way, there was at least a chance. If I accept, she said slowly, and I win, you guarantee that your people will honor the agreement on my voice, which has guided my people for 20,000 cycles. If you win, we will cease hostilities and seek peaceful relations. We will return all captured territories and prisoners. We will never again raise arms against humanity. And if I lose, then your species will learn to serve. You will not be exterminated, for you are too valuable to waste. But you will submit to our rule, our laws, our way of life. Kira looked at her team. David was shaking his head slightly, his eyes filled with concern. Elena was clutching her weapon, ready to fight. Maria's face was unreadable. Chen Yuki was watching the other High Command members, alert for any sign of treachery. They had come here to end the war. This was a chance to do exactly that. I accept, Kira said. The arena was located in a massive cavern beneath the command hub. Thousands of Kraylocks gathered to watch, their chittering voices creating a sound like a million insects. At the center of the arena was a circular platform surrounded by a deep pit that dropped into darkness. Kira stood at one end of the platform, stripped of her weapons and armor. She wore only her uniform and her father's old knife, which she had carried since the day he died. The Kraylocks had allowed her this one concession, perhaps amused by the sentiment behind it. At the other end stood the Kraylocks champion. It was the largest of their kind that Kira had ever seen, easily 3 meters tall, with a body covered in thick armor plates. Its claws were as long as her forearms, sharp enough to cut through steel. Its tail ended in a barbed spike that dripped with poison. This is the destroyer, the eternal voice announced from a raised platform overlooking the arena. It has killed more enemies than any warrior in our history. It has never been defeated. Kira sized up her opponent. It was bigger, stronger, faster, and better armed than she was. In any normal fight, she would have no chance. But Kira had stopped fighting normal fights a long time ago. She reached inside herself, searching for the place of hyperfocus. She thought about everyone who had believed in her. Sergeant Williams, Commander Varro, James, her team. She thought about everyone who had told her she would fail. Marcus, the officers at the academy, everyone who had mocked her for being a girl from the mines. She thought about her father, who had died in the tunnels of Colony Nexus 7, and the last words he had spoken to her. You are stronger than you know, Kira. You are braver than you believe. When the darkness comes, when everything seems impossible, remember that you carry our strength inside you. All of us who came before, all of us who loved you. We are with you always. The hyperfocus came like a wave, washing away her doubts and fears. The world slowed down. Her senses sharpened. She could feel every vibration in the platform beneath her feet, hear every whisper in the crowd, see every twitch of the destroyer's massive body. Begin, the eternal voice said. The destroyer charged. It moved with terrifying speed for something so large, crossing half the platform in a single bound. Its claws slashed toward Kira's head, fast enough to kill before she could react. But she had already moved. She dropped low, letting the claws pass over her, and rolled between the destroyer's legs. Before it could turn, she was behind it, her knife flashing toward the joint between its tail and body. The blade bounced off armor that was harder than she expected. The destroyer's tail whipped around, and Kira barely dodged the poison spike. She danced backward, reassessing her opponent. The armor was too thick for her knife. She would need to find another weakness. They circled each other, the destroyer's compound eyes following her every move. It was learning her patterns, analyzing her fighting style. These champions were bred for combat intelligence as well as physical prowess. Kira attacked again, feinting high before going low. Her knife found a gap in the armor at the destroyer's knee, drawing a thin line of blue blood. The creature roared in pain and surprise, lashing out with a claw strike that would have taken her head off if it had connected. But it didn't connect. Kira was already somewhere else, circling, probing, looking for more weaknesses. The fight settled into a rhythm. The destroyer would attack with devastating power, and Kira would slip away, leaving small wounds behind. She was wearing it down. Death by 1,000 cuts, but she was also tiring. The hyper-focus demanded enormous mental energy, and she could feel it slipping away. Soon she would be back to normal human speed and reflexes. And then the destroyer would kill her. She needed to end this now. The destroyer seemed to sense her urgency. It pressed the attack, forcing her back toward the edge of the platform. One more step, and she would fall into the pit below. Kira saw her opportunity. Instead of retreating, she charged forward, directly into the destroyer's attack. Its claws closed around her body, exactly as she had intended. The pressure was enormous, crushing her ribs, driving the air from her lungs. But she had gotten close enough. Her father's knife plunged into the destroyer's eye, the only place on its body not protected by armor. The blade sank deep, piercing the brain behind. The destroyer screamed, a sound of pure agony that silenced the crowd. Its claws released her as it staggered backward, clutching at the knife embedded in its skull. Kira fell to the platform, gasping for breath. Her ribs were broken. She could taste blood in her mouth, but she forced herself to rise, forced herself to stand and face her dying opponent. The destroyer collapsed, its massive body crashing to the platform with a sound like thunder. It twitched once, twice, then went still. For a long moment, silence reigned in the arena. Thousands of Kraloks stared in disbelief at the sight of their greatest champion lying dead at the feet of a human female. Then the eternal voice spoke. It is done. The contest is complete. The human has won. Kira swayed on her feet, barely conscious. Her team rushed to support her, Elena and David taking her arms while Maria watched for any sign of treachery. You fought well, the eternal voice said, descending from its platform. I have not seen such skill in all my long years. You have earned our respect, Shadow Devil. My name is Kira, she managed to say. Kira Vance. Kira Vance. The elder bowed, a gesture of respect that seemed alien coming from a Kralox. I will remember that name, and I will tell my people to remember it as well. You are the one who ended the war. The aftermath was chaos. When news of the peace agreement reached human space, reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the end of 50 years of conflict. Others were suspicious, convinced that the Kralox were planning some kind of trap. Politicians argued about the terms of the agreement. Military leaders debated whether to trust their ancient enemy, but the Kralox kept their word. Their fleets withdrew from human space. Prisoners were returned. Contested territories were evacuated. For the first time in half a century, humanity was at peace. Kira became more famous than she ever wanted to be. The story of her duel with the destroyer spread across human civilization, growing more exaggerated with each telling. Some said she had killed the creature with her bare hands. Others claimed she had called upon some divine power to grant her superhuman abilities. A few insisted the whole thing was propaganda, that no human could possibly have accomplished what she was said to have accomplished. She did her best to avoid the attention. After so many years of fighting, all she wanted was peace. The Federation Council offered her any position she wanted: admiral, senator, even president. She turned them all down. Instead, she asked for permission to return to Colony Nexus 7, where everything had begun. The colony had changed since her childhood. The old mining tunnels had been expanded and modernized. New industries had developed. The population had grown tenfold, but some things remained the same. The community center where she had learned to read still stood on the same corner. The hospital where her mother had died of mine lung still served the families of workers. The memorial to the methane explosion victims, including her father, still bore the names of 23 miners who had given their lives so that others might live. Kira stood before that memorial for a long time, remembering. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. "You told me I was stronger than I knew. You were right. I just wish you were here to see it." She felt a presence behind her and turned to find Sergeant Major Williams approaching. His hair was gray now, and he walked with a cane, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "I heard you'd come home," he said. "Thought I'd see how you were doing." Kira paused, unsure how to answer. "I'm tired. I've been fighting for so long. I'm not sure I know how to do anything else." "You'll learn. That's what you do. You face impossible challenges and you overcome them." William smiled. "Besides, you're not done yet. The war may be over, but the work is just beginning. Humanity needs leaders for this new era of peace. Real leaders, not politicians. I turned down the council's offer. I know. That's why I'm here." Williams reached into his coat and pulled out a small case. "The council has created a new position. Special Ambassador for Human Kralox Relations. They want someone who understands both sides, someone who can build bridges instead of walls. They want you." Kira opened the case. Inside was a medal, different from any she had seen before. It bore the symbols of both humanity and the Kralox, intertwined in a design that suggested partnership rather than conflict. "I'm no diplomat," she said. "You're wrong. That day on the arena, when you could have killed the Eternal Voice and completed your mission, you chose to listen instead. You chose to understand. That's exactly what a diplomat does." Williams placed a hand on her shoulder. "The war is over, Kira. Now comes the hard part, making the peace last. Who better to do that than the woman who won it?" Kira looked at the medal for a long time. She thought about everything she had been through. The mines, the academy, New Harmony, Terra Station Prime, the Kralox homeworld. She thought about everyone she had lost and everyone she had saved. She thought about the girl who had stood in line at the recruitment center, ignored and mocked, told that she didn't belong. That girl had proven them all wrong. She had risen from nothing to become the greatest warrior humanity had ever known. She had faced death countless times and emerged victorious. She had ended a war that had raged for 50 years. Now she had a chance to build something even more important. A future where humans and Kralox could coexist. A future where no one else had to die in endless conflict. "All right," she said, taking the medal. "I'll do it. But on one condition." "Name it." "I want to open a training program for young people from places like this." She gestured at the colony around them. "Kids from the mines, the farms, the forgotten corners of human space. Kids who are told they're not good enough, that they don't belong, that they should give up on their dreams. What kind of training? Everything I learned. Combat, yes, but also leadership, diplomacy, problem solving. How to face impossible odds and win anyway. Kira's eyes were distant, seeing a future that didn't exist yet. I was lucky. I had people who believed in me when no one else did. Not everyone gets that chance. I want to change that. Williams nodded slowly. The council will agree. In fact, they'll probably throw resources at you that you can't even imagine. You're the most famous person in human space right now. They'd give you anything you asked for. Then let's make sure we use that fame for something worthwhile. 5 years later, the Vance Academy opened its doors on Colony Nexus 7. Its first class included 300 students from 50 different colonies, all of them selected for their potential rather than their backgrounds. Kira stood at the entrance as they arrived, remembering her own first day at the Fleet Academy. She had been scared then, uncertain, surrounded by people who didn't want her there. Now she was the one doing the welcoming. This is a place where you can become anything you want to be, she told the assembled students. Some of you will become soldiers. Others will become scientists, leaders, artists, teachers. What matters isn't what you become, but who you are. Never let anyone tell you that you're not good enough. Never let anyone define your limits. You are capable of more than you can possibly imagine. She looked out at the young faces before her, seeing echoes of her younger self in many of them. The girl from the wrong side of the colony. The boy with the damaged leg who had been told he could never serve. The young woman whose family had discouraged her dreams because they were unrealistic. The universe is full of people who will try to hold you back, she continued. They will mock you, underestimate you, tell you to give up. Let them. Their opinion doesn't matter. What matters is what you know in your heart. That you are strong, capable, and destined for greatness. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The mines, the academy, the wars, the friends she had lost, and the enemies she had defeated. I was once like you, she said. I was mocked for being a girl from the mines. I was told I didn't belong among real soldiers. Every step of the way, someone tried to stop me. She smiled, a fierce expression that carried echoes of every battle she had ever fought. They failed. And anyone who tries to stop you will fail too, because you are humanity's future. You are the ones who will build the peace that we fought so hard to win. You are the ones who will reach for the stars and make them yours. She raised her hand in salute. Welcome to the Vance Academy. Your journey begins now. And somewhere, in the depths of Kraylock space, the eternal voice heard the story of the new academy. It felt something unfamiliar stir in its ancient heart, something that might have been hope. The war was over, the future was unwritten, and Kira Vance, the girl they had mocked for being who she was, had risen to become not just the enemy's greatest fear, but humanity's greatest hope. Her story was just beginning.